Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Tara Martini, along with host Becky McNattin. We are glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health.
Hi, everybody. I am really looking forward to our show today, which was inspired by a listener to our show who reached out to us with a topic. And Tara, we were super excited about
So
this.
excited.
The listener highlighted the challenges of being a parent to a young adult and asked us about the mental health impact of relationship shifting and changing during this stage of life. And it got the two of us thinking.
It did.
There are so many concerns in this stage of life and a lot that isn't discussed on ways to promote young adults launching into the world with a sense of identity and empowerment. Mm-hmm. So today, we're talking all about emerging adults. We're talking people ages 18 to 25, and we're going to process through what's going on at this stage, how to support young adults, when to let them make mistakes, when to step in, and ways to foster meaningful connection. And here to help us talk through it all is Emily Higgins and Robin Melville, two therapists with Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness that work frequently with young adults. Thank you for being here today, you two.
Yeah,
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
We're so excited to have you here and talk through your insight around the young adult stage of life. Almost 10% of the population in the U.S. falls into this young adult category. So we're talking about millions of people who are in this space of transition in their lives who have people in their worlds wanting to support them. Mm-hmm. So this topic impacts a lot of humans.
It does.
To all three of you, you all work with, but Robin and Emily, you work with lots of young adults. What would you say are some challenges at this stage of life for people?
I think a lot of the challenges is really balancing wanting to become that emerging adult, but also still needing that support from especially family and friends, and kind of that also, you're an adult, you're an adult, but also you're your parents' child still.
Yes.
And trying to manage that, that's a big one.
Yes.
For sure. And I think something that I say to my clients often in this age group is I think people kind of overlook the challenges of this group. We talk about teenage years being difficult. Yeah, they are. But I think a lot of people kind of either they're over it and they forget, or they're younger and they haven't experienced it yet. But they don't realize this time period is so challenging.
It is. And it's that deep desire for so much freedom, but then also going, but wait, I don't want to do that by myself.
Yep.
Right. I want mom or dad or my guardian to do that, but I want this part, that freedom. So it's figuring out what's developmentally appropriate.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point, Tara, that the world also expects you to show up with the kind of new freedoms, as you're talking about. It has a new level of expectation that we don't necessarily know how to prep people for.
Exactly.
And sometimes there's not a way to prep a person for a thing until they just do it.
Right.
But they're living it and experiencing it, and the world wanting someone to, whatever be adult means, and they don't know what that is.
Well, wanting freedom and getting freedom are two different things.
Well said, yeah.
And sometimes you don't know what freedom means.
No, you don't until you're sitting in it.
Right, because with that comes some responsibilities too. Yeah. Robin's laughing.
Yeah, I think, Tara, you brought up that good point of them wanting to do that, but a lot of my young adults are also how do I even do these things? Or, to what degree am I supposed to need, parents or adults' help? And how much of that is, am I even okay with them helping me? And sometimes, again, they don't know, what you said, until they've experienced that experience of how much do they even want of those things.
Right. Because we do spend so much time preparing the teenager, right? The high schooler, the middle schooler. But what skills do we give our young adults in order for them to do well with this freedom?
Such an interesting topic here. Right now, we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned as we talk through really supporting emerging adults. Thank you for listening to Feels Out Loud. We will be back in just a moment.
Welcome back to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I'm Tara Martini, along with the fabulous Becky McNattin. Let's dive right back into our discussion on young adulthood and what this stage of life needs from a mental health perspective.
Well said, Miss Tara. Today is all about emerging adulthood, that time for 18 to 25-year-olds to begin life more independently. And young adults are moving into this realm of navigating their own lives with so many things to consider, including new expectations, perhaps setting realistic expectations, boundaries. We've done shows on those before, communication, finances, and I want to get to all of it. But before we do, I want each of you to think back. What was young adulthood like for you? And how is the process of launching different today from your view?
Oh, that's a good one. I kind of chuckled when I read that question.
Yeah.
Just kind of thinking back into my own experience. I wrote down that it was exciting and terrifying simultaneously.
Good way to put it.
Yeah, I remember this really big sense of being excited about that independence that you were talking about, Tara, but also terrifying of especially if you do schooling or programs, you're like so in that schedule and that world that I was like, what am I supposed to even do next other than work? And how do I even do that? And am I going to be happy doing whatever I'm doing? Just kind of all of those, what am I doing? So that was like a big thing of what I was thinking about. And I think a lot of things that I wrote down too was that a lot of what I imagined I was going to do and when I was going to do it was not anything of when I did it or even how I went about it.
Good point.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So a lot of that.
You asked that question, and the first word that comes to mind was rough.
Okay. Well said.
Elaborate on that.
I kind of get this image in my mind of stepping on the gas completely, but then screaming at the same time, just we're going full steam ahead, and it's terrifying. So, Emily, when you said exciting and terrifying, it's very much that of there feels like a divide of I really want this, and I have no idea what I'm doing, and this is scary. And I think you asked about today compared to back in the day.
Yeah, right.
And I think I'm biased, but social media just makes it
I
so
wrote
much
down,
harder now.
That's what
I
I
mean,
what
it's
I
just
meant, thought
a
about.
huge aspect, and the comparisons and the expectations, like you said, timelines, things like that you come up with when you're a kid without considering, you don't know all the barriers and all the obstacles and all of that, but you get to that age and you're like, oh, I should be dating, I should be having my dream job, I should be making this amount, I should be fill in the blank. And it's everything you see on Instagram, and it's easy to feel like you're not adding up.
Right.
Yeah.
Where before, for me, the only comparison I had really, or people I had to compare to, were my friends or people in my high school. Literally was it. And it wasn't even everybody at my high school. It was just the people that...
Well, you knew.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's it. And so such a small circle where now for my daughter, as she's approaching, 11th and 12th grade, it's not just her friends at high school of who's doing what. It's these strangers on her phone
Yeah.
that she will never meet in her lifetime.
Sure.
But she's seeing what they're doing
Yep.
Right.
post high school.
And all of the, what you don't see is all of the resources that they have.
Exactly.
All the nuances behind or the
Exactly.
struggles that they're
Right.
going through.
Yes,
too.
because you don't
Yeah.
post that stuff.
Yep. You post the things you want to show out into the world, right?
Exactly.
The milestones, the accomplishments.
I
Yes.
heard this quote once that said, social media is everyone's highlight reel.
Yes.
And you're comparing your behind the scenes.
Yes. Yep.
That's
Which
a
is
good
so
way to
true.
put it. Yeah.
Very good way to put it. And it just gives, as Tara was talking about, it gives these data points that we previously didn't have. And there's some cool things about that. We've talked about it, that even those on the show, it gives an opportunity to see, oh, this would be an option, or I could do that, but the downfall of it is you have these spaces of comparison too.
Yep.
Jeffrey Arnett is a leading expert in the field, and I want to highlight some of his awesome books. And if you're watching us on video, you can see here, I brought them into the studio today. Emerging Adulthood is one of them. Emerging Adulthood, The Winding Road from the Late Teens Through the 20s. And then his second book, Getting to 30, A Parent's Guide to the 20-something Years. I would totally encourage anyone who has a young adult in their lives to check out these books. He also has a website, jeffreyarnett.com. And I want to share a quote of his with you three. He theorized that emerging adulthood is neither adolescence nor young adulthood, but is theoretically and empirically distinct from them both. Emerging adulthood is distinguished by relative independence from social roles and from normative expectations. What are your thoughts? You a little bit alluded to this in the first segment on sort of you're not in one spot and you're not in the other. But what do you all think about this quote?
Yeah, I was reading that earlier, and I was like really thinking about what I thought of what would be distinguishing between emerging adulthood and like adulthood itself. And I feel like I've only kind of maybe started dabbling in the adulthood myself, but the word that came to mind was like integration and feeling more settled. Kind of like Robin, you were talking about the not feeling settled, kind of feeling in multiple places. And I still feel like, you know, it is difficult sometimes to feel fully settled, right? That feels maybe even unattainable. But yeah, I really felt like that emerging part is you really trying to figure out these things, having so many question marks, and then the adulthood is you being more sure and confident about like what you need and how do you get those needs met.
Well said.
I think the end of the quote, though, I would question. He says, you know, you don't have those normative expectations yet.
Okay.
But is that am I misquoting that?
A relative independence from social roles and normative expectations that people maybe are giving, at least my thought is giving in a space of grace on perhaps what we look at adulthood requiring.
Okay. See, I don't know if it feels like that when you're in the moment. I don't know if you feel like you are independent from those normative expectations. I think it's like the idea of like, I can't meet them, but they are still there. Like I'm still a functioning person in society now.
Right. Well, you know, a great example, I know someone whose young adult child was faced with needing to call and make several appointments and wait on hold for stuff. And the young adult, would be expected to do that. They were around 20 and said, I have no idea how to do that. I don't even know what phone numbers to call. There's not a phone number to call.
Yep, the how do I do that?
So you're totally right. We aren't necessarily removed from the normative expectation because the world would say, well, you have to do this on your own.
Yeah.
Right.
So part of his books, Jeffrey's books, he created 5 aspects of this life stage, this what he calls emerging adult, that make this a unique developmental period. And I wanted to go through them one by one today because they highlight more specifically some of the things you all have brought up already. And the first one is identity exploration. This time for people to figure out who they are in the context of things like love, work, beliefs, values. These are big concepts. Emerging adults are faced with, all of a sudden, a ton of possibilities and life choices. And part of the exploration and struggle of one's identity is things like, who the heck am I?
Right.
Who are all of these people out there? How do they connect to me? How do I fit into that? So how do you all see people developing an identity during this time frame?
Do you want to go? Do you want me to go?
I'll chime in. I think, we see a lot of young adults kind of just out socializing and just kind of exploring different avenues of like, how do I want to exist in this society without the restraints that my parents have maybe had on me.
And I think that's the key part
I was
too,
gonna say
is
that.
wait a second, I have the freedom to like explore at a deeper level because I don't have my parents, because all of us, or most people, right? You're living at home. You have the norms and expectations of your parents. Well, for the first time, you're living independently. And it's like, wait.
Right. You start to be like,
I have my own set
yeah,
of rules I'm living by. I have the capacity to explore who I am at a deeper level, independent of my home.
right. Like those rules all of a sudden don't apply to me.
Yeah, or they don't have to.
Yeah.
They don't have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a big one. A lot of my young adults talk a lot about is who is their identity apart from their family, and especially their parents, and like the beliefs that they, have grown up with, and also which ones of those beliefs or things do they still want to maybe hold on
Correct.
to, and which ones do they, are like, that's really not for me anymore. And how do I push up against that and have that boundary with my family?
Yeah.
And that's a huge internal conflict sometimes, right? Because sometimes the young adult will realize, wow, when I explore that, I actually do align really well with how I was raised. And in other times, it's, well, when I really look at it, I actually don't.
Yep.
And then what do I do with that?
Well, and then like the feeling of just being separated from your family and kind of like, well, am I wrong? Like the self-doubt that can come with it too, of just
Right.
recognizing like maybe I'm not who they told me to be.
Right. And on the
And
flip
is that
side,
okay?
for the caregivers to receive that exploration from a spot of your kids might make choices that you do not like.
Yeah.
As they are exploring what resonates with them. As you said, maybe I do align with that. Maybe I don't align with that. But the four of us have talked a lot about what does support look like in the identity development timeframe. And I can see how it would be hard to, you mentioned it, Emily, just now. How do I share that if I am kind of moving in a different direction? And from caregivers, you may not like what is getting chosen, in part because as we identify who we are and develop that identity, we're clunky. We try out new things and feel what doesn't work for us. And some of the things you two have told me are, support looks like being available and being open, knowing that your kid might make choices that you don't love, but validating without lecturing,
Which is hard.
which is really hard. Listening without judgment, responding versus reacting, things like treating your kids like they are adults. And these are all practice things, because as your kids are developing identity, caregivers are also learning how to show support in an entirely different way. Yeah, thoughts from any of you on that?
Well, I think one thing for the caregiver is awareness of your own emotions, so that when
Oh, good point. Yeah.
your kid does come to you and share something that maybe you're afraid for their safety, or maybe you're worried, like, oh, is this going to impact them down the road? And your fears or your anger, your beliefs, being aware of those so that you can tend to them maybe later and not just kind of like put them all on your kid at the moment.
That's well said.
Yeah.
I think that I was going to say something similar to that, in that really understanding that this is a fragile time for both of you, right? So understanding there's going to be vulnerability with you as well, along the lines that you just said of, my child may come to me when it comes to identity or whatever it is, and it may be different than the way we had raised the child. And how am I going to process that? And knowing like there may be some emotions that are uncomfortable and things like that, and almost preparing, yourself for that, and just knowing like this is fragile.
Yeah.
And there's going to be emotions and there's going to be hard feelings, but we can do hard things.
Yep. And that we've talked about this many times on the show. You have been an adult. If you're the caregiver, you've been an adult for a while, but you've never been the parent to an adult
Correct.
at the age that your child is in that moment.
Yep.
So it requires a lot of grace for yourself on all the sides, as you talk about that it's fragile. The second stage that Jeffrey Arnett talks about is instability. So he has identity development first, but then instability, where he says emerging adults have this inherent time of instability where it's common to change jobs numerous times. His book notes the average American holds 8 different jobs from ages 18 to 29, which was a lot.
Yes.
70% of emerging adults report they have not made as much progress in the careers as they had hoped. So kind of that space of judgment or comparison is what they believe is occurring. And it's a huge time of moving, migration to different places. We test out relationships, sometimes numerous partners, and that's part of the identity development stage. But lives are in flux. And so I want to talk about the experience of instability, but I would love to have each of you, the nuanced aspect here is the adversity that comes in instability. That circumstance is wrought with watching our kids, if you're a caregiver, or while you're experiencing, if you're the young adult, constant adversity in this ongoing change. What would you say? How is it important to experience, and how is it just challenging to navigate all of that instability?
Well, I think it's important to experience, because if you don't experience, kind of this rocky part of all of it, you're not going to know what you like or don't like, right? Because you have to, like you mentioned before, you have to experience it to even know what you even think about it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really big important part about why it is needed. And sorry, what was your second question?
I guess the inherent value of it, but you got to that.
Yeah.
So you answered both my questions.
I could speak to the challenges of it a little.
Yeah, sure.
Just thinking back to my own experience and remembering my parents' responses and like the 8 jobs thing, I definitely check that box. I think probably more than 8.
Okay.
Actually.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And moving. I think my mom had counted one point how many times they had helped me move, and it was like 13 times, like in and out of dorms and apartments.
Well, yes,
and
each year, yes, in college.
And so it's like, and when I tell them, I don't know if I like this job, I want to look for a different one again. So it's kind of like, as the caregivers, they're just seeing constant change, which is difficult to watch someone go through.
Well, and I think maybe piggybacking off of that, Robin, of being the parent, watching that constant change and trying your best to trust your young adult and be like, you know what you need, or that this job is not serving you, or your roommate situation isn't, it's just not the tea right now, and you want to move. But I think it is hard, right? Because you were saying, Becky, being the adult parent, right? You haven't experienced what that's like yet. So you're just how do I even navigate that?
Right.
Where the young adult just wants your support.
It's a good point on that. Trust is so much a key to lots of this. And I hear often, and I'm sort of in a stage of people who have emerging and launching adults as kids. And I frequently have discussions about, when do you step in? How much adversity do you have your child experience? When do you say you're going to need to stay on hold for that long and you're going to have to make the phone calls yourself? And how much instability is too much instability? If as your parents would say, kind of, really another job? It's been 8 seconds in this one. But, I'm being silly, but that is a really subtle thing to try to navigate when we believe that adversity is required. That teaches us, as you said, Emily, that we can do it. And we learn who we are and what we like and what resonates with us. But we also don't want someone to struggle too much or be flooded by that.
But the opposite, too, is true. Sometimes protecting our young adults.
Yes.
If we protect them too much, our child will not be able to get through any level of adversity. And so it is finding that balance of, we all know, and we've all seen this, whether it is with former students or clients or, any of them, where a parent works so hard to protect their child from any type of adversity. And then we see that child go into, the real world. And it's like, wait, they have no skill in order to get them through any real world problem. And so it's finding that balance of saying it is okay to struggle a little bit to learn how to survive. But you're right, Becky. Do we want them to constantly be drowning in, their own issues? Absolutely not. But it's a matter of finding that beautiful balance of what does it look like to be able to offer support, but not be overbearing and do everything for your child, but also know that it's not healthy to just sit back and go, well, have at it, you're 18.
Yeah, which I suppose would lead to this idea of communication being helpful and important,
Right.
checking in.
Yes.
You and I maybe every week talk about compassionate curiosity.
We do, girl, first episode ever.
Ask some questions
Yes.
without coming in with statements of what
Yes.
ought to be done, but asking some questions about how it feels for them.
Right.
So I wanted to get to the third area that he talks about in his book, and that's self-focused.
Okay.
That emerging adulthood is perhaps the first time when individuals can basically do whatever they want and not answer to anyone before they engage in that. And so emerging adults are free from some of those expectations that we would have of younger children. And being self-focused has a serious purpose. He talks about this, that it's self-sufficiency.
Yep.
So the reframe for caregivers is a self-focused nature during this time is important. It is teaching self-sufficiency. It's the main goal, even if your kiddo isn't saying this out loud. So we want people to, in the end, become other-focused as well. But this can be really hard to navigate. And my thought is this generates some conflict because caregivers might think their young adults are a little self-centered or egocentric. And how does the self-focus impact this? What do you all think?
Oh, so when I think about the self-focus, I also think about like what is developmentally like appropriate. So like my brain jumps to like the 18 to 25. They are going to be more self-centered. They are going
For
to be
sure.
about like what are my friends
Yes.
doing versus what are like I'm going to hang out with my friends instead of hanging out with my family on the Friday night.
Yep.
But then that also brings into play what you said, Becky, of like, how can we, as the parents, acknowledge that like it's not rejection and just maybe the choices are not even like it's not even about like trying to like be hurtful to their parents necessarily,
Yes.
but just wanting to live their life differently.
Try new things.
Right. Well, also acknowledging, though, that if we look at like brain development, 18 to 25, there is a large change as far as brain development, right? So 18, by the time you get to 25, your brain's almost, it's closer to being fully developed. So at 18, they're making choices that are very self-centered and focused on whatever. Hope is by the time they're reaching 25, 26, that they're making less, things focused on themselves, but still having some of those traits where they should see a shift occurring over the course of those years.
Good point.
Well, and I think that's also like back to, letting when do you step in is also
Yeah.
like maybe they need to witness or experience some of the consequences of their self-focus.
I like
Yep.
that. Yes,
Yeah.
that's a really good
18
point,
and
Rowan.
25.
Yeah.
Yep.
True, they have to make their own
Yeah.
mistakes.
It
Well,
sets
and-
the guardrails.
Exactly. And if you're seeing the same behaviors at 25 that you saw at 18,
Maybe step in.
there's some conversation
Maybe that's
Well,
the time.
and
that might need to happen.
And you all have me thinking about, as perhaps on the caregiver side, if the caregivers can say your young adult's choices are not about you. Keep in mind this idea of self-sufficiency, that they're practicing what it's like to become
Yes.
themselves. And so their choices are not necessarily your personalization.
Yeah.
And that might help relieve some conflict too. It gets to this in-between time though. And Jeffrey Arnett talks about the feeling in between, where you aren't in one spot and you aren't in the other. You are not in childdom and you aren't in this other space of like the knowing of adulthood. And what would you all say are some challenges of this being in between?
I think we've been kind of chatting about it on like the parent perspective of when does the parent step in, but also I think on the flip side of when does the young adult reach out and ask for help, and kind of tying that all
Yes.
together. I think both of those are kind of like how do we do this dance per se together, and I think what you mentioned before, Becky, of like communication, I think is so important, and just openness and willingness to just be there for one another, maybe not to change or fix, but just to support.
And even if a young adult could say, I can do this on my own, do I need to?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah.
Part of
a great question.
Part of emerging adulthood is figuring out, when do I ask for help? When do I resource myself? And to have that internal dialogue about, is this a time where I reach out to people?
Yeah.
Would you have thoughts, Robin?
Just the idea of the in-between is, I remember the rude awakening of like, wait. So I have to make dinner every night? Like, I have to feed myself every evening?
It doesn't just arrive.
Yes.
Yeah, or clean your
front of
face.
you.
Do all the things.
That's like, to me, just feels like, okay, that's very in between, because it's, you're going from teenage years where typically you're getting things done for you or provided, or, you have that support system.
Yeah.
And then as an adult, you're pretty much self-reliant, and get to that point where it's like, yeah, this is just what we do to function. But when you're in between those two, it's kind of like, whoa, I don't know what to do here.
Yeah. And that's just a fantastic transition to his last stage, which is the age of possibility, when I don't know what to do because there's so many options that he talks about. This is just an opportunity for young people to transform their lives. They can kind of pick all these paths and break away from unhealthy family dynamics, or think about, what does the future look like for me? And so that's really cool news, but that also can be exceptionally scary.
Very scary.
With lots of things not ascribed. And also can come with some painful parts for adults, which we could do a whole other show on, of when your young adult is struggling. When
Right.
you have a young adult who has addiction, regression, mental health issues, but that becomes different than this age of possibility. And one of the questions that I get asked, and it was a quote in this book, so I wanted to ask you all specifically about possibility. This woman says that, I have 3 kids in their late teens and early 20s. All of them seem to have big dreams. Movie director, latest technology, owning a restaurant, and no apparent strategy for reaching them. When does optimism become delusion? And so in terms of this age of possibility, one of the things that I have a feeling that some caregivers are wondering is, of course, it's not the end of parenting. So when does possibility, do you step in with reality as well?
It makes me laugh so hard because as a former teacher, if I saw one more child be like, I want to be a YouTuber, I want to make video games, or I want to be a professional, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But the kids who came to me, and I would be like, well, how are you going to get there? 99% of them could not tell me. But there was always like one kid every year that would come to me and say, I want to design video games, or whatever the goal was. And I would say, how are you going to get there? And the kid would come to me with like a detailed plan. I'd be like, you, my friend,
You're going to make
will do that one day. And it's always those kids that like end up doing it because you come with a plan, right? And you figure out step by step. But for young adults, sometimes they're so overwhelmed. Well, how do you get there? I don't know. And sometimes it takes just sitting down, right, with that young adult and saying, what's step one?
That's a really good point, Tara, because it actually leads back to what we've talked about and how communication shifts between parent and child during this stage. That your job of parent isn't to say whether or not that dream will occur.
Right.
It isn't to step
It
in and
isn't our
say,
job.
you don't need to come in with reality and say, no, that's never going to happen.
Right.
It is about being the space of support, and how might you do that? And what would be the way to take an action step towards that goal or dream? And helping them think through, if the total picture is very overwhelming, which it might be, your space could be, what does the next part of that look like?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, when you were talking about that, I was actually thinking about when I was kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do in college, and I realized very quickly I couldn't survive off of just like being a performer or a dancer. And I remember my mom saying, well, like, what else would you want to do? And I was like, well, I want to help people. Well, how could you how could you do both of those things? And I remember just her kind of like leaving that question of wondering, and just kind of not saying you're going to do it this way, but just being like, how are you going to do that? And it like made me think about it of like, how can I do that? How do I want to do that? How can I even go about it? And then I tried to seek out more help on like, how do I, get to point B, or like, what internships do I need to do? Who do I need to talk to?
Yeah, because what your mom didn't do in that is also do the dream for you either.
Right.
On the other side of like, if that's your dream, we have to. I have to make it happen for you.
Yeah, this is what we're gonna do to do it. And
She was because in part of that, sometimes the dreams will change if there's no action steps, and then nothing occurs from it. We can ask questions, but if nothing happens, nothing happens.
What were you gonna say?
That brings up a good point of, I was thinking like hold both. Like the possibility and the optimism of like, okay, that's a dream. That's awesome. Like I totally believe if you want that, you can get that. And that way it's like, I'm here, I support you. And like, sure, if you really want it, I believe you can get there. And at the same time, where you are right now, what do you need to survive? Or what do you need to meet your needs right now? So I think adding the like,
I like that
the
a lot.
emphasis of like right now is helpful, is in saying like, we're not saying that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
But it's not happening at the moment. So what do we need to do?
Yeah, what's in the present too. Yeah.
And also the piece, though, that the now, what you do now, can be attached to achieving that goal sometime in the future.
Yes.
So what can you do now that can contribute to the future? Because a lot of those goals are huge goals or dreams that a lot of parents don't see the connection to, right? Oh, yeah, right. Okay, Tommy, you want to do that. Oh, you want to be that professional baseball player. Okay, what are you doing right now? Well, I'm playing baseball on the middle school team. Okay, maybe we need to get you a private coach, or whatever it is. Like, it's, if that's your dream, well, then you better start mowing some lawns to save up for whatever. It's that idea of like the now can have an action attached to the dream.
Yeah.
Rather than it just being future oriented the entire time.
Yeah. And that's a beautiful tip to leave caregivers with, and for the young adults who might be listening to the show, that you don't have to have the dream right this second, but you could have something toward that and make that. Think about that tolerance of not knowing, practice the distress of like, I don't totally know where this is going, but I know what I know right now.
Yep.
And how could that maybe move in that direction?
That is something that I actually hear a lot with my clients is like, well, I don't know where I want to go, so I don't know what direction. And I say, well, what are you interested in right now? Because sometimes we can start down a path and not know where it leads, but you enjoy the path you're taking.
With an idea that it isn't the wrong direction.
Right.
Yeah.
It's never the wrong direction.
That it isn't that there's one path and then that none of the other options will ever become options again.
The paths cross. You can take a detour.
We are a table of people who have many life detours. The collective detours in this room right now is enormous.
Many.
But in terms of like these tips for parents, I love this idea of like being patient, and you're talking about bringing it back to this moment, and know that this is a space for adjustment. We're adjusting the roles. You aren't the active manager anymore, so be available without hovering. You have to consider yourself as kind of this like resource for the young adult, not the guide,
and not the fixer.
And not the fixer. Every caregiver is also on their own journey as well. And we'd said this earlier in the show, but this idea of needing our own spaces of support. Sarah, you and I have talked about this. We can't show up for another person if we aren't resourced ourselves. And watching our kids have struggle and make mistakes is heart-wrenching. It's heart-wrenching. But they're not the people to process those things with. Our own people are. Any thoughts that, you would say, one of you would say before we go?
Just trust. I don't know. That's the word that's coming to mind.
Yeah, trust, patience, showing up. Listening is a big one. A lot of my young adults just really want their parents to listen without judgment, because a lot of times the stuff they're already talking to them about, they've already either done or decided on. So
Respect.
And breathe.
and breathe. Oh, yes.
Yeah, breathe through.
Right.
Everybody.
'Cause sometimes-
Caregivers and young
Yeah,
adults.
because sometimes we're like, we do not know where this is going.
Just breathe.
We do not know. Well, so much to think about here. We're headed to a commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to talk through listener questions. Feels Out Loud will process your thoughts in your questions in just a moment.
You gotta find your people, then you'll find yourself. You gotta find your people. Express yourself.
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this part of the show is where we talk through questions from you all, our fabulous listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly, or email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com. Of course, follow us on social media as well. We really do want to hear from you and what you are wondering about.
And lots of gratitude to our listeners who have sent in questions about supporting emerging adults. We specifically picked this question because it was from an emerging adult. And I loved that. So this listener, you all, says, I am a young adult who definitely is trying to figure out life, and I don't have much support. So any tips for me? And what would you all say to this very sweet listener?
Well, first of all, my heart goes out to you. That's really hard. That's a hard spot to be in.
Hard.
But I love that they have the skills to reach out and ask for support. You know,
Yes.
they're seeking support because they have the skill to say, I need support.
Yeah.
Yep.
Recognizing the need.
Yeah. It's huge.
I think recognizing is the first step, which they did a great job. With some of my young adults who have less support, a lot of the things that they talk about is what can I do? What do I have control over?
Sure. Yeah.
How can I meet people or, put myself out there or find the job, right? And those are kind of things that I think it just poses a different challenge when you have less support. A lot of those individuals that I think about, it's nerve-wracking because you're also I'm trying to find my people, or I'm trying to find this support system that doesn't kind of exist at this moment.
Yes.
And how do I even go about that? And it almost feels like dating in a sense of just trying to even find your circle of what
Developing that
looks
circle.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, I would say to listener, go back and listen to the second segment of the show again and give yourself grace for those 5 categories. You're in all of those right now. And if you don't have a person in your world who is kind of a sounding board, that give yourself permission to just think through how are those operationalizing for you right now. I would say share your ideas and thoughts with others in your life, whoever they are, if they're coworkers, if they're even peers. And ask questions to whoever you can. Ask questions to whoever you can. Because the more curious you are, the more space you will give yourself to explore.
Yeah, and to just show up.
I was thinking connection is going to be, like you said, to whoever you can, even if they can't,
Totally
support
agree.
you financially or anything. But the model of development that has different stages of crises, the one at this stage is isolation versus intimacy. And so seeking that connection and seeking, friendship or just coworkers, really anyone you're around interacting, that's going to help you feel less isolated and help you kind of find your voice and find, who do I want to connect with?
Some of my young adults too who are I moved here and I know nobody. A lot of times they talk about what their hobbies or interests are, and that's a way there are so many actually awesome resources in Minneapolis where young adults can go do activities and things, and it's not necessarily to date, it's to just meet people or to just go to an activity. And some of my clients have really enjoyed that because they're I don't have to necessarily talk to anybody if I go there, but I want to when I go, but at least I'm going to go do something like a running club that I'm interested in already, or a book club that I already enjoy doing that. So it feels a little less pressured in that sense.
I totally love that. It's the space to explore.
Yeah.
It's the space to explore. Wow, we're already at the end of our show. Thank you both for coming today, and thank you to our listeners for listening this morning. Join us next week as we process the power of tears. And in the week ahead, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness, everyone, and your voice is one that the world around you needs to hear. Share yourselves, friends.
Some do, some don't, some will, some won't. I wanna